record. So give us just a few seconds to get that all set up and make sure that everyone's in the room, and then we will start the briefing and get things going.
Hi, so are you going to give me permission? Oh, wait.
Hold on just 1 second.
Oh, you got it. All right, perfect. Thanks.
Additionally, all of our media partners joining in, please make sure you are muted at this time. Again, we're getting everyone into the room right now, making sure that recording privileges are granted. A few more people hopping on. So just give us a little bit longer. All right, I've got the thumbs up. I believe that we are good and set to go this morning. Making sure that everyone, again, is in the room, and all of our media partners, please make sure you are muted. My name is Dana Porter. I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. This morning's briefing is focused on opening weekend for the 2022 gun deer season. We're aware that there were a lot of headlines coming out of this weekend, so to help run through things and cover them all, we have Jeff Pritzel, our DNR Deer Program Specialist, and Major April Dombrowski, the DNR Recreational Safety Section Chief, joining us. We'll have time at the end for some questions, so we ask that you hold your questions until the end, so please stay muted until that time, and then we'll have an opportunity for everyone to raise their hands and ask individual questions. So with that, I will turn things over to Jeff this morning.
All right, thank you, Dana. And good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to cover the deer season so far. I'm just going to go over a couple of bullet points from the deer management program standpoint that, as Dana said, were probably on the minds of everyone over the weekend. First, on our end, the weather and the conditions always play a factor into hunter success, and every year there's a half a dozen different variables that are either working in favor of or maybe against the hunters. And this year on the favorable side, we had snow cover. On the challenging side, we had high winds on Saturday, went into Sunday in the southern part of the state, along with some snow and some wind chill. So there's some challenges there. But despite that, our opening weekend registration numbers essentially returned to normal. If you compare it to last year, we're looking at like a 15% increase over last year on opening weekend. Some may be surprised at that given the weather conditions, but keep in mind that in 2021, we had a relatively slow opener. And so this isn't so much a big jump from last year as it is a return to more of a normal, what we've seen over a 5-year average. And so, but bottom line, that was good to see that those registration numbers returned to normal over the weekend. And how it plays out the rest of the week, again, will be influenced by a number of factors. Regionally, across the state, the zone that we saw the highest increase on opening weekend was the Central Forest part of the state. And their increase was well over last year's opening weekend at 37% above last year, and 16% over the 5-year average. It's likely that the forested zones, both the Central Forest and the Northern Forest, had a little bit of a buffer from that wind effect on opening day, simply because of the fact that you're in the forest more. And it was the really open agricultural country that was really exposed to those whipping winds. And so we probably saw a little bit of higher success in the forest zones because more of the hunters were maybe able to position themselves in a way that the wind wasn't so. License sales, as of the opening of the season, were down, but not in any surprising fashion. I mean, our gun license sales were 3% behind where they were last year at this time. Our overall deer license sales are running about 2% behind last year. But this is a trend that we've seen going on for the last 20 years. And it's not unique to Wisconsin, it's national. And actually in other states, their trend downward in license sales has been steeper than Wisconsin's. And so in one sense, we're fortunate from that standpoint. But license sales were down, and we're always interested in, and we've been tracking that. But it's following right on the trend that we've been seeing since the turn of the century. Another thing that's down a little bit opening weekend is CWD sample submit. But again, it doesn't come as a real surprise given the weather conditions, as cold as it was. People may be delaying, butchering their deer or processing them, which means that a trip to the self-service kiosks or other mechanisms for submitting CWD samples may have just been kind of deferred a little bit over the weekend. So we want to emphasize that those CWD sample submissions are as important as ever. We want to keep it at the pace, if not expand the pace that we've seen the last couple of years. So we encourage hunters to, if they haven't yet and they still have the deer in their possession, they haven't processed it yet, to please consider submitting a CWD sample from that. And then finally, just emphasizing that deer registration is really important. It's the most important thing hunters can do for the future of deer management decisions. Without it, we wouldn't be able to have this discussion here this morning and track how the harvest is going. And we've had a long cultural history of mandatory deer registration in Wisconsin, and that benefits participation. Some of you may have seen that we did put out yesterday on social media platforms an acknowledgement that we were hearing on Sunday afternoon that there may have been a slowdown in the functionality of the registration system. And there was some conversation coming in on social media to that effect. And so as an example of the power of our electronic registration system, we were able to then go in and look at previous year's registration volume flow on a per hour basis and compare that to what we saw this past weekend. And there really was no change, nothing evident that would suggest that there was interference or that the data submission was negatively affected by a slowdown or something in registration. There may have been some situations where the process was going slower, and we apologize for that. And our note yesterday was to encourage people that if they got frustrated and hadn't registered their deer, that they still should go back in and do so. And again, but our data that we looked at over the weekend would not indicate that we lost anything due to any challenges with the registration system. Again, our numbers are up from last year. And again, the registrations per hour on a trend basis did not suggest anything. I liken, if there was a slowdown, it really isn't any different than what we would have experienced under the old system when parking lots got backed up and a hunter may have had to wait a half an hour before an attendant could get to their deer for the registration process. So sometimes we bring peak volume, that can happen. But the most important thing is for those that may have understandably been wondering, our data that came in seems robust and current. And so we're glad to see that the system is performing as intended. So with that, that's what I've got. And before we go to questions on my end, I'm going to turn it over to Section Chief April Dombrowski. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everybody. So just doing a brief report out here with law enforcement efforts. Our wardens were extremely busy over opening weekend, and with that, we did have a number of hunting incidents that I'm going to take this opportunity to share with y'all. Over the opening weekend, we had 6 total hunting incidents, with 1 being a fatal. Out of those 6 hunting incidents, 3 of them involved one or more party with part of the same party, and then 3 were self-inflicted. And when I look at what we have in these 6 with victim age, the victim age ranges anywhere from 11 to 69. And then the shooter age ranges anywhere from 15 to 41. And so as we move into Saturday, we had an incident in Sauk County where a 22-year-old male was the victim of a gunshot wound to the thigh. And this deer drive, a 20-year-old male shooter was the driver in the hunting party, shot at a running deer, which ended up striking the victim, who was a stander in that hunting party. The victim was transported to the hospital and treated. And again, the shooter and victim were members of the same hunting party. In Marquette County, while in a ground blind in the field, a 69-year-old female was the victim of a gunshot wound to the thigh area, where a 16-year-old male shooter was hunting from his ground blind in an open field and both fields were, separated by a pond. And when he shot at a deer, he struck the victim. The victim was transported to the hospital and treated. And again, shooter and victim were members of the same hunting party. In Oneida County, we had a 24-year-old male who suffered a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the foot. The victim was repairing his rifle sling when his hand froze to the firearm, and as he went to pull his hand off the firearm, he inadvertently hit the trigger, causing an unwanted discharge. And again, the victim received medical treatment for his injury. In Iowa County, we had a 15-year-old male who suffered a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the foot. The victim was unloading his firearm while sitting in the passenger seat of a vehicle when the firearm discharged. Again, the victim was transported to a local hospital and treated. As we entered Sunday, we had in Forest County, we had a 33-year-old male who suffered a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the little finger or the pinky finger. Here, the victim was manipulating a handgun when he had an unwanted discharge. Again, the victim was treated for his injury. And then, again, with a heavy heart, we did have one fatal in Green Lake County, and this involved an 11-year-old male who was the victim of a gunshot wound to the chest. A 41-year-old male shooter attempted to unload his firearm while he was placing the firearm in the back seat of a vehicle when the firearm discharged, striking the victim. The victim was med-flighted to a hospital where he died. And again, the shooter and victim were members of the same hunting party. I just ask, that we continue to be respectful of these preliminary reports, these synopsis. We have a number of, active investigations taking place as a result of these incidents. But I also want to remind everybody that, hunting continues to be safe in Wisconsin. If we look back in 1966, we had a total of 264 hunting incidents. So in 1967, we initiated a Wisconsin hunter education program. And from there, in 1980, we established the requirement of blaze orange. In 1985, we established the mandatory hunter education for those born on or after January 1st of 1973. And then in 2009, we also initiated the mentored hunting program. And really, we contributed this success from all these efforts and for the decline in incidents. Again, in 1966, we had 264 incidents. Last year, 2021, we had 12 incidents. So that's a reduction of 95% with those efforts. And again, we contribute the success of these efforts based on a strong volunteer instructor corps. Obviously, the work and a presence that we have with our wardens, our outdoor skills trainers, our hunting public, and our media platforms that all have influence in safe behaviors of hunting. And if I can leave you with a message or a continued emphasis, it really needs to come home to the 4 rules of firearm safety, right? The acronym TABK. Treat every firearm as if it's loaded. Always pointing that muzzle in a safe direction. Keeping your finger, be certain of your target, what's before and what's beyond, and then keeping that finger outside the trigger guard until you're ready to shoot. Those are 4 rules. And when we're preparing for a firearm season or a firearm hunt, always important to load the mine before loading the gun with these 4 rules of firearm safety. But with all that, if it's one thing that we can have our folks take home, is controlling that muzzle of the firearm. Just can't stress enough the importance of those firearm safety rules and controlling that muzzle. With that, I'll pause here, and if this group has any additional questions, whether it be for Jeff's program or or what I just reported on, I think we have an open platform for that.
We do, April, thank you. So we do have time for questions now. Please remember to keep all questions this morning on topic. And since we want to be respectful of everybody's time, make sure we listen so we're not duplicating questions, and just ask one question at a time, please. So go ahead, raise your hands, and I will go through and call on each individual. And when you hear your name, that will be your signal to unmute and ask. All right, Matt, you are up first. Go ahead and unmute.
Hey, good morning. Probably a question for Jeff here, but just generally speaking, how much of the harvest tends to come on opening weekend? So, and then maybe like how nervous do you get when some bad weather does approach, like Saturday with the winds and snow and that?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's a great question because opening weekend is very influential, but I'll say not as influential as it used to be. We used to be much more dependent on it than we are now, as we've been talking that the harvest opportunity or effort has been spreading out more over time. But still, as it is now, about half of the firearm harvest will happen on opening weekend, and then the other half will happen, the remaining 7 days of that 9-day season. And specifically for bucks, about 60% happens on opening weekend, with 40% spread over the rest of the 7 days. And so, there's been years, you have to go back actually into the late 1980s, where we had bad weather on opening weekend that suppressed the harvest, and the department actually went through emergency rule processes to extend the season. We don't do that anymore because we already have some auxiliary seasons after the gun season that could potentially make up for that. And as we've been talking about for years, the more of the harvest effort has been shifting away from the gun season into archery hunting prior to the gun season. So it's not quite as critical as it used to be, but and these variables tend to balance themselves out over time. And so I would suspect that, we probably saw what'll be about half of the harvest. Last year, when we had a kind of a slow opening weekend, that is kind of concerning because we used to say you can never make up for a bad opening weekend. And that really wasn't true last year. We did have a slower opening weekend. And although we didn't catch all the way up, we did make up ground over the rest of the 9-day season in 2021. So it will be interesting to see how the rest of the week plays out.
Thanks.
Awesome, Jeff, thank you. Todd, I know you've had a few questions in the chat. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
you're good to go.
Hello? Jeff, do you have actual numbers for both the opening weekend harvest and how that compares to 2021, as well as license registrations and how that compares to 2021? Not just percentages, but the actual raw numbers. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Todd. So we have on our website a page that is called the Deer Harvest Weekly Survey Update or something to that effect. We just updated it this morning and had it just so that it's live now. And so we've got the weekly summaries that includes all of the numbers just for this year. But we also add, once the gun season happens, and we've done this for a number of years, we add to that a spreadsheet for the 9-day season, and it's updated and it's on there now for opening weekend, and it has the details for every county, every deer management unit, and it compares this year's numbers to last year's, and then also to the 5-year average. Because, like as I was saying earlier, it's a little dicey to just compare one year to the next because the variables can change, and it's not really always apples to apples. And so it's more important to look at about a 5-year average. And as I said, we're right on where we typically have seen if you want to treat it as a 5-year average, and the increase that it's showing from this year to last year isn't necessarily an increase as much as it's a return to normal. There's also a press release coming out simultaneously here with this briefing that has those detailed numbers for license sales. And as it relates to the numbers that we saw for opening weekend, we're over 100,000. We're at 102,000 something. Again, it's on our website. and buck registration was at 55,000 something relative to 47 last year. So I don't have it down in my head right now, but it's out there and ready to be consumed for everybody.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. In fact, the links that he was just talking about are in the chat right now. So if anybody was looking for the breakdown in those numbers, they are in the chat, as well as the 5-year average comparison for the harvest. Any other questions? Feel free. Matt, another one. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, just a quick one for April here. Mentioned a couple of the incidents this weekend happened around vehicles. I just wondered if you could clarify what the rules are as far as firearm handling usage in a motor vehicle. Thanks.
Yeah, if you recall a few years back, we used to have unloaded and in a case in a vehicle, and the one thing that has changed, if you're looking at or around the vehicle, is the casing requirement, which it no longer needs to be that encasement, but it still needs to be unloaded in a vehicle.
Thanks, April. Ryan, go ahead and unmute.
I think that's me. I'm filling in for Ryan here. My question is just regarding if any of these incidents, if there will be any charges for any of the 6 incidents mentioned, or any further law enforcement action taken.
A good question. And as like I said earlier, these are all pending investigations, and really too early for us to conclude with that. And we just again need to be respectful of the investigations and the processes that they have.
April, thank you. Adam, I just saw your hand in the chat. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a similar breakdown that you could provide? Maybe this is a better question for April, as far as the numbers historically versus opening weekend and later in the season for safety, similarly to what we were talking about with the harvest. Is it the most dangerous time during opening weekend, or is it difficult to find trends? Anything you can share on that?
So we do have resources available on our website, and every year we put together an annual report that really captures a lot of that data, the statistics, those type of things. Compared, just fresh on my mind, compared to last year, opening weekend, we had three total incidents opening weekend, and then we ended the gun deer season with 6. And then overall, the whole hunting season of 2021, we had 12 total incidents. So, this opening weekend, we had a few more than that, you can look at various different things. When you look at weather conditions, you look at, people hunting in cold temperatures, maybe not what they're used to in previous seasons, and obviously wearing, bulky clothes and different things like that, and just, where are folks' attention when you add that discomfort of the elements of the outdoors, right? And so, we have the 6 on opening weekend. We also know that with opening weekend, this is the time where we have the most hunters on our landscape during the gun deer season. And I don't know what the total numbers are, but I mean, I think we can average anywhere from 500 to 600,000 people that could be on the landscape throughout the course of opening weekend. So, that's a lot to entail. So, but we will continue to work through this gun deer season. We're going to continue to emphasize the importance of the 4 rules of firearm safety, make sure it's on the forefront of people's minds. And as we conclude the gun deer season, we're not out of the woods yet, right? We have holiday hunts, we have muzzleloader, we have those later seasons in December. So we'll continue to run data and not jump to trends or conclusions until we're able to take a really good look at conclusion of gun deer season and then conclusion of 2022.
April, thank you. Any other questions from anyone? I know we're approaching 11:30. I haven't seen anything else pop up in the chat. We'll give it a few more seconds if any more questions do come up. Paul, okay, there we go. Paul Smith, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, could you please tell me how many gun dealer licenses were sold in 2021? You've got the number for this year, and it's vague in the press release as to how many were sold last year and this year, what the decrease is. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. If somebody else, I don't have it right in front of me as I'm online. If there's somebody that has access to that chart, we can pull the number up and get it in, or we can get it in the chat here.
I can paste it in the chat here. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Katie.
Perfect, Katie, thank you. I believe that Bowen may have dropped an emoji for a hand raise. Is that question still there?
Yeah. So I was just wondering, because I know they were talking about high winds challenges for like the southern part of the state. Is there an area you can go to where you can know like other areas of the state where some weather challenges were?
Yeah, well, the weather on Saturday was pretty much statewide. That we had, the upside was we had snow on the ground, but we had strong winds. It wasn't in the north. It wasn't terrible right out of the gate in the morning, but it got stronger as the day went. And I think everyone all afternoon, didn't really matter where you were in the state. It was certainly squalling and snow squall. So visibility, a lot of folks describing even temporary whiteout conditions. And that was affecting everyone statewide on Saturday. You had opportunities to get out of the wind because of topography or something like that. That may have worked in some parts of the state. And on Sunday, it seemed like there was more of a breakdown where in the northern half of the state, it was really nice and calm right out of the gate. But in the southern half of the state, again, being more open anyhow, but it was still windy, less than 10 miles an hour, but there was a wind chill effect on Sunday morning, certainly in the open country. But that maybe affected the southern half of the state more on Sunday than the northern half of the state. But by Sunday afternoon, most of the reports are coming in that we had really great hunting conditions Sunday afternoon, close the weekend out.
Awesome, Jeff, thank you. Anybody else? Other questions, hand raise? We'll give it just a little longer. Again, I know this is recorded, so folks might be watching it later. Media partners, if you do have any questions later in the day, please feel free to email us, dnrpress@wisconsin.gov, and we'll be able to send that around to make sure that it gets all to the right folks. And with that, if we don't have any more questions from our media partners, we'll wrap things up today. April and Jeff, thank you so much for helping to guide things. And again, you can email us, dnrpress@wisconsin.gov, if you have any questions later on in the day, y'all. With that, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.